I first probably became aware of being diagnosed with CF maybe when I was 5 or 6. It was a couple days into a Bible school, and it was hot, and so we had the dorm doors open, and I realized other people weren't doing therapy. And I kind of looked at other kids, and since I hadn't been to school or in a lot of group situations other than with church, that kind of hit me as I was different in some way. But I don't think I quite put it together that it was anything bad that was different.
Cystic fibrosis is a genetic defect that affects the mucous organs of the body. So the biggest impact is on the lungs because the mucus tends to get thick and sticky and make it difficult for the lungs to do their job. Over time, it becomes infected, and the infection causes inflammation, which has been a bigger problem for Chrissy than the infection most of the time. It decreases the size of the airways, and so it's really hard to breathe in and out. Then the lung gets scarred, so it won't work anymore in pockets. And then pretty soon you've just got a big mess in some area where parts of the lung are not working at all. Chrissy has a right lobe that's pretty well gone.
In the last few years, I've added adrenal insufficiency, which means I can't produce my own adrenaline, so I have to take pills on a very specific schedule or my blood pressure will go to 0, and that's not good. I was diagnosed with diabetes last year. I have an insulin pump, so I don't have to take shots anymore, but I still have to test on my fingers.
Great.
95.
Okay, good job.
I have a rare side effect of the CF that's only affects 2% of people, but odds have never really been in my favor that way. It's called hypertrophic pulmonary osteoarthropathy, and it basically means there's extra bones growing in my joints.
Having studied the stages of grief when I was in college, I can recognize some of them as they go by. I know when Chris was first diagnosed, we cried, but what else are you going to do? And then there were times when it was really frustrating and, went through anger that was misdirected. Finally, I came to the realization that we have today. We're alive today, and actually today things are pretty good. And there's going to be some day that's out there that's going to be sad. But that day is not today. And if we spend too much time worrying about what could happen or what didn't happen, then we're going to miss out on everything that's right in front of us.
Some of the things that have really helped me have been when people take the time to ask you, what is it like? Before they start spouting advice or, throwing out cliches, instead of just stopping and asking, what is it like for you when you're in the hospital or just day to day, and find out some of the details or some of the things that make my life different than other people's. And that has been really helpful when people stop and take the time to get to know the problem before they try to help. Some of the other things that have really been helpful for me when I've been in the hospital or I've been really sick are when people think about it and bring a scripture to bear. There have been countless times where someone will just send an email and say, I read this verse and I was thinking about you, and I thought this might help you to think about the way that you can serve God even when you're in the hospital, or something that will just turn my mind around and refocus on the important things and what I'm supposed to be doing and what I'm supposed to be learning, without saying, tomorrow will be better, because you can't make these promises. Tomorrow might be worse. You never know. But one of the things that helped me too is when brothers come and pray with me. And I think it takes a special God-given ability to lead people in prayer. It's probably the most strengthening and encouraging thing that anyone could do with me. Sometimes my actions would say that I had given up on God. But I think the thing about faith is that even if I go through these tough times and I say, "You've never been there for me. I don't want to be, involved with this right now. I just want to close off, shut down for a while, not think about anything." The great thing is that I can come back. There have been a number of times where I feel like God has taken me back. I'm not sure how not to give up on God, because he doesn't give up on me. Over the winter, we studied Hosea in Bible class, and I think that hit me the most powerfully of any book I've ever studied, when I realized that, we're the faithless ones, and God is pursuing us because he loves us. The thing that I learned was that God wants a relationship with me, and he's willing to do a lot to protect that relationship.
I'm not suffering. Chrissy suffers from a disease, but I've been blessed to have a child. I didn't think I would have a child. At 38, I would kind of thought that boat had sailed. I've been blessed to have this child, and she's a very unique person. From the time she was really small, she's talked about going for blood draws. She was absolutely terrified. She has really rubbery veins. They're really hard to get to. It wasn't unusual for them to spend 45 minutes trying to get that vein. It was a painful process. When she got to be about 4, I started to think, maybe it's time she can pray about, this, because she would be so scared going in.
Big as you can. Fill it up all the way and blast it. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Good job, good job. Push it out, push it out. Work through the cough. You can do it, you can do it. Just a few more seconds. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, and get there.
We sat down to pray. I'm thinking to myself, she's going to ask God, not to do it, and make it not hurt and all these things. And, I kind of expected that, but I thought, that might help her to express those things. And all she prayed was, "Please, God, give me courage." And I was really moved by that. I've always been really impressed by the difference in her attitude and her expectation versus mine spiritually. I don't look at things and difficulties in my life and think, God, give me the courage to face this. I usually think, how can I get out of this altogether? And I'm not saying she doesn't, I'm just saying that even when she was really young, she would take a different take on things. And that has always been impressive to me and encouraging to me spiritually. In so many ways. She's been a gift, and she's alive. She's not dead. God has given me, 22 years with my daughter. Some of the prognosis they gave us early on was, she had about a 50-50 chance to live to be 21. Birthdays weren't like a fun thing for me. You're always trying to be happy and celebrate with your child, but in you somewhere is here's that milestone that brings me closer to that number, and it's really hard not to think about those things. It's really hard to stay focused on more positive things and remember that Jesus can return at any time. Whatever time we spend dwelling on what might be or what could be or the possibilities that are not good, we waste that time that we have for the good we can be doing.
The funny thing about medical treatment, especially with chronic illness, especially with CF, nobody ever really comes into a room and says, "We think you've got about 5 years. just so you know, heads up, the prognosis for someone with CF in general is about 37, life expectancy. We've discussed in my family that I think I've been really blessed to have gotten to where I am, because there are people who get to this stage of disease looking at transplants, things, end-of-life things, and they're 9 years old. I think it may have led me to pursue the truth more strongly, maybe faster than some of my peers. I think I had more of an expectation of pain and discomfort and things like that than did some of my peers. And I think that led me to discover my own mortality a little sooner. And combining that with what I was reading in the Bible, that really spurred me to investigate, well, what do I believe? What am I living for? What's my purpose? The big questions. I think that that's allowed me to grow. God has saved me out of a lot of things that would lead to death, and that I wanted to be able to give something back to Him, and that I wanted my life to mean something, especially if it wasn't going to be 90 years. That I think that has led me to grow in His service.
What we see and what we experience is not the end of the matter. We have a God who can look past our temporary frame and call us back to life again. That even if we die, He can call us by name and we will get up and answer Him. We tend to think of things as being at an end when we lose a job or when we lose a family member, but God tells us that it's not so, and God gets the final say.
She spends a lot of time and energy trying not to look sick, but I've seen her go into church when it was all she could do to get up and put clothes on, literally with a fever of 105. It's amazing to me because, so many people talk about, it's really hard for me to get into church. I've never seen anybody work as hard just to go to meeting as I've seen her do, and to go to Bible class as well. I remember her saying to me, I haven't done anything. She's made her faith known in a way that is really with a quiet dignity that people, I think, can respect. She has integrity in her life. And I think that stands out because I've seen hospital people come up to her and ask her about her faith. What is it you believe? And ask her questions about the Bible and stuff. People don't do that if you don't have integrity. I guess I would encourage people to reach out to their brothers and sisters and let them know what their needs are. When we've said, boy, we'd like to see somebody, or, it'd really help to have somebody come down. People have come down to the hospital on holidays, and I remember sisters who came during unbelievable traffic. We've had people come down and break bread with us, which is, I would encourage people to offer to break bread with somebody who's in the hospital, because you don't always remember to ask. And the hospital days are so draining. You lose track of time and you lose track of your routine. Those things are really encouraging. Chrissy mentioned praying with us. That's a huge thing, because when you are down and discouraged, sometimes it really helps to have someone voice the things that you wish you could say or that you feel but aren't in touch with those feelings right away.
The most helpful thing is asking is there anything you need, or what can I pray for? I think
was really good.
It was a big thing for me when people asked I've been praying for you, but what specifically, And I think that was good on a number of levels.
people really didn't understand, you know, and I'd get really frustrated with that when I was young, you know, like nobody really understands what this is like, and they'd suggest things, you know, and I'd feel like, well, you have no idea what you're saying, you know, you have no idea what this means to us, you know, or what this involves for us. I remember Chuck saying to me one time, you know, people don't understand. They're not going to understand, you know, they're not living this. And it was this great reality moment for me of, you know, Chuck has a way of cutting to the chase, which is good for me, because he's right. God understands. That's all. You know, other people don't fully understand, and as much as you try to explain your life or whatever, for each of us, we live sort of in this life of our own that other people don't fully understand. Only God does. And over the years, I took a lot of comfort in that, in knowing that God fully understood.
The good news is that we already know that we're temporary, and we already know that we depend on God. And we already know that people get hit out of nowhere with health problems, with job problems. And what happens is that when you start listening, you find out that there's a lot of people that have problems. It's not always on the prayer list at meeting, and it's not always, you know, going around in the gossip, but there's a lot of people that have problems, and I think for me anyway, it's made me more sympathetic. You know, I used to avoid hospitals like the plague. I don't know exactly what I was thinking, other than they were sad places, and I don't want to be sad. I want to be happy. But then, you know, you hear about somebody else's child who's in the hospital for a week or 2 weeks, and you know what that's like. You can imagine. First, we have to redefine good. We tend to define good in terms of what's pleasant. You know, if it's easy for me, that's good. But good doesn't always mean that, especially if we consider Jesus in Hebrews, where it said he learned obedience by what he suffered. You know, was that good? Well, it was good for the world, but I don't think that when Jesus was in the thick of it, he was thinking, gosh, is this ever good? Sometimes bringing good is hard, and it takes discipline, and it does take suffering. So there are things that we had to learn. There are things that I had to learn that wouldn't have come about otherwise. Adam was prone to sin. He was prone to death, and he was told he would return to the dust. And that's been going on for thousands of years, ever since Adam was kicked out of the garden. So why don't we have perfect bodies? Because we're just made up of dust. We're fragile things. People get sick. People grow old. People just wear out.
You know, people come up to you and they say, why did this happen? Why does God do this to people? Why does God allow this to happen? As if now that it's happened, you suddenly know. Yeah. You know, and I think that's such a telling point, because I'm not sure God always, not that he doesn't want you to know, but you're not always ready to know, you know, that it could be a long time or never. You know, it was interesting because one of the things we were reading in the daily reading yesterday was about Mary, and it said Mary, you know, twice in the chapter it says, highly favored of God. You know, God highly favored her. I mean, she was not going to die on the cross, right? But her son was, and it was going to tear her apart, and he knew it was going to tear her apart. And that was in that equation of being highly favored. So, you know, whatever's happening to you isn't a reflection of whether God loves you or doesn't love you, whether God's angry with you or not angry with you. He's not necessarily punishing you, and he's not necessarily rewarding you. It's more like I think he's saying we don't always know